Greetings everyone, my name is Vinny Horrible and this is a very quick tutorial on the homebrew Nemesis map called Nemesis Apex. The map itself is pretty big, so in order to play with it you're going to have to free up some space on the table, and so far it is not a scripted map, but it can be played without scripting if you're willing to put in some extra work during the setup. However, it is not more tedious, or not that much more tedious, than setting up the actual original game. Now the map itself, other than just the board, brings several new tokens, namely the supply ships and the transporters. The supply ships should be placed in their beginning places at room 004 and room 022. The transporters should be placed into these transporter rooms, two of them sitting at the inner part of the station, while two of them are at the outer rim. It does not matter which one of them is on the inner side and which one of them is on the outer side. However, there should always be two on each side. That is all you need to know for this setup. Everything else is set up as you usually would set up a classic Nemesis game. So let's move on to the new gameplay features. The main feature of this map is a rotating outer rim of rooms. The map is split into two general sections. The inner section, which essentially the inner section does not move and always stays the same, and the outer section, where the rooms rotate clockwise. What that means is every time after you move the time token, or the timer, essentially, after you progress it, you should move each room on the outer rim clockwise, basically in the following manner. However, you do not move any noise tokens. This is done mainly for the reason that if a player, for example, decides to sort of ride along the rooms, they might be forced to exit or try to look for a way around if a room is surrounded by too many noise markers. For example, there are the noise tokens. They have fallen through the board. Normally they are on top of it, of course. So for example, if there is a room surrounded by noise and there is a player who is riding the rooms, then perhaps it would be safer to go somewhere else, because this room, if he would just stay and let himself ride along, this room would cause him quite a lot of trouble. When riding a room, the players do not generate any additional noise. However, when moving, they still generate noise as they normally would in a classical game. The second new feature is the introduction of supply ships. As you may have noticed, there are two different parts of vents, the blue vents and the red vents, but they work in a little bit of a different fashion when compared to the classic red and blue vents from the alternative Nemesis board. For example, we have a captain here who has created noise in corridor 1 or 2, which is the blue vent. Now, there is no slot for blue vent, but instead, the captain would place a noise token into the supply ship. Now, the supply ship move counterclockwise by 2 rooms every time after you move the rooms. So, after all the players have played their turns, you move the time counter, you move all the rooms clockwise, and you move the supply ships counterclockwise by 2 rooms. So from 004, this one goes to 006, and from 022, this one goes to 021. Now, the map is split diagonally into a bottom left, which are the blue vents, and the top right, which are the red vents. And as you probably know, the supply ships rotate between them. So for example, as long as the supply ship with the noise marker is on the bottom left part of the board, everyone who is in a room with a blue vent are in the danger of spawning in an alien through the vent. However, after the ship moves, to the other section. Right now, the supply ship with the noise is in the top right section. The other section uses the other ship. So, the captain may have spawned a noise marker in this supply ship, but now the supply ship is on the other side of the board and it is someone else's problem. Now, these ships move automatically 2 rooms per turn, essentially, but if a player is in a room with a computer, and that means any room with a computer, they can essentially spend 2 of their action cards, as you would, but instead of performing the classic room action, they type commands into the computer and cause the supply ships to accelerate their resupplying routine, essentially moving them manually by 2 rooms. What this means, for example, I will demonstrate right now. Let's say that we have a soldier over here in this room. This room does not have computers, so let's just say this is the comms room, right? So let's say we have a soldier in the comms room. It is quite a bad situation for him, right? He would need to move out, but he needs to stay there to use the comms. But there's so much noise around. Corridors 4, 2, and 3 are compromised, and therefore he's in a high risk of spawning an alien. So, what he does is he essentially pays 2 cards to manually move the supply ship. This supply ship moves to the other side of the board, while the fresh and empty supply ships move to his side. His vent, right now, therefore, is empty, and he caused some trouble for his opponent, the pilot, who suddenly has to deal with noise on his side of the board. And the final very important addition are the transporters. The transporters essentially allow the players to move from the inner section to the outer rim of the space station. How do they work? Well, let's say that our soldier here has reached the location of the transporter. What he does then is pay 2 cards, as if he was using a room action, and he essentially rides the transporter to the other side, and he can just keep on going. In a scenario where when the transporter is on the other side, he needs to spend his 2 cards to first call the transporter to him, and then spend additional 2 cards to ride the transporter across the gap. So the movement can be quite costly if you mistime it, or if some player is a jerk and just calls the transporter to their side. Now there is another complication. If the players are competitive and they need to essentially kill each other, for example, the soldier is running away from the queen who is in the center part, and it's quite bad for him, so he wants to call the transporter and leave. However, there is a character on the opposite side of the room. This character, the pilot, or not the pilot, the captain, might not want the soldier to travel via the tram or the transporter, so he decides to cancel the order. You can imagine it as a person holding an elevator door open while you are on the other floor wanting to call the elevator. This is what the captain is currently doing. He is cancelling the call orders for the transporter, keeping it on his side. So, for the soldier to call the transporter to his side, he would need the captain's permission. However, once the captain leaves, he can call it as he normally would. The final feature of the transporter is, because it has 2 slots, just like escape pods have, this vehicle can carry up to 2 players. So, the players may fight for the transporter and block each other, but they can also help each other. For example, in a co-op game, the captain plays his turn, and he decides to spend 2 cards to ride the transporter. He can then invite the soldier and ask him, hey, would you want to ride with me? And if the soldier agrees, he can get aboard and both of them can get transported. However, in order for the transport to work, both players riding the transporter need to agree to essentially ride it. And if both agree, then the transporter works just as it would normally would. Keep in mind though, it can carry only 2 people. And if you're playing with, let's say, someone like the Bounty Hunter, the DLC, or not the DLC, the expansion character, the Bounty Hunter, essentially, your dog still counts as an extra character. The same thing happens if you're, for example, trying to transport... I don't actually think there's anyone else who has 2 tokens, so essentially the 2 slots are the maximum that can be filled. But 2 players can travel with just 1 player paying the cost, which is good, especially in a co-op game. And that is all regarding the Nemesis Apex homebrew board. Everything else plays just the same as a normal Nemesis game. It should work with every type of alien that is in the original Nemesis, along with the Carnomorphs and the Voidseeders, that is. It might have some issues with the new aliens added by Lockdown, because, well, I haven't tested those yet. Now, the map has been tested a few times, but if you play the map and you find any issues, or perhaps if you don't find any issues and find something good as well, feel free to leave some comments or any sort of feedback. I will look into it, and this map can be further improved. Thank you everyone for watching, and have a great game.